Hello, my name is Michelle, and welcome to my YouTube channel where we talk about everything Christianity and a little bit of love and marriage. And today I'm going to be talking about pride as being one of the worst sins. Living in this life, we can and will fall into the sin of pride, and why and how we as Christians should stand against pride, especially as quote unquote Pride Month is here. So let's talk about it. But before we get into that, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. So let's talk about pride. Micah 6 verses 7 through 8 says, "Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." I was doing a little Bible study with the Lord, and He led me to this verse of Micah, and He told me to talk about pride. Pride is one of the worst sins. The Bible talks a lot about pride. Jesus, He mentioned how He hated pride, and that we as Christians, we are called to walk humbly with our God. This is really a call for us to examine ourselves constantly and say, are we walking humbly before our God? Are we offering the right things to the Lord? The pastor at my church on Sunday, he was talking about how Abel, he offered the first fruits to God. He offered what the Lord wanted, and he was humble. But Cain, in his pride, he offered God whatever he wanted to give. It's so easy to fall into the sin of pride. It's so easy because, well, I'm going to talk about later, especially when you find yourself in a position where you have been exalted by gifts that the Lord gave you or talents that you have that all come from the Lord anyways, but you get exalted and you find yourself in this position where people are exalting you for those gifts and you forget God in your ways. And it's so it's so crucial that we don't forget God and that we always walk humbly before God. The Lord hates pride. He created everything that we see, including us, and He has given us our gifts, the gifts and talents that we have. The Bible says that every perfect gift and every good thing comes from above. Corinthians 1 verse 31 says, "Therefore, as the scriptures say, if I want to boast, boast only about the Lord." Whatever we have, we should be boasting about God and constantly giving God the praise, because really it just feels so yucky and just so cringe when a person elevates themselves and talks about themselves. We've all been in conversations like that with people who just talk about themselves and talk about the great things they've done, and you just feel just weird because you're not the one that's supposed to be elevating yourself. Of course there comes a time when you should talk about the things you've done. Even Paul did those things where he talks about how he boasted about the things that he's done. But there's a time and place for that. In interviews and such like that, you should talk about the things you've done. But if you're just boasting about yourselves to others, like, "Ooh, look what I've done, and look what I've done here, and look at this," it's just so cringe, because that type of praise should be coming from other people, or it should be coming from the Lord saying, "Well done, because you've done the things that you have done, and you've done it for me." Or it should be coming from other people saying, "Wow, like you've done this and you've done that. That's great." Like there's a verse where it talks about how you shouldn't, when you go to a party, you shouldn't say, "Oh, I deserve to be in the chief place at the party. I deserve to be at the top place and sit in the best area," lest another person come through and the person who is in the party tells you, "Hey, you have to move because there's somebody more important than you coming in." So it's better to not demean yourself. Of course, like you should have a healthy self-esteem, but to not think of yourself as highly as you ought to think of yourself. Of course, like I said, we all should have a healthy confidence, but we shouldn't be boasting and being prideful about who we are and what we've had. Like the Bible says, those who elevate themselves will be taken down, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. Yeah, we have an entire month dedicated to pride, and unfortunately, it's back again. It's the month of June. On this channel, I talk a lot about how we are to separate from this world, as the word says. And this is a huge reason why we should be separate from the world, because Pride Month is where we pretty much elevate the LGBTQ lifestyle, and you're going to see lots of ads and advertising and shows elevating Pride Month and Pride this and Pride that. It's just another example of why pride is so contentious to us as Christians, and it should be, because we are not to be priding ourselves for anything, for nothing, let alone who we want to fall in love with. The LGBTQ are told to be proud of who they are and to just shout from the mountaintops that it's okay who they decide to have sex with. Basically going against the principles of the Bible. And if you are a person who follows the Bible, this is not okay to you. When we have a YouTuber, a very popular YouTuber named Miss Rachel, who is known for creating children's videos, she recently invited Dylan Mulvaney, who is a trans influencer, to come on her show. And if you don't know, Dylan Mulvaney, he's a guy and he dresses like a woman, and he was in the news last year for a huge boycott that was done in the US where they had Dylan Mulvaney as their spokesperson, and a whole bunch of people decided to just completely stop buying Bud Light ever again. Bud Light lost millions upon millions of dollars for this. Recently, Miss Rachel offered her support for Pride Month and suggested Dylan Mulvaney come on her children's show. As expected, she received a lot of backlash. Here is what she had to say about this.
I've shared prayers on here before and said God bless, and that's because my faith is really important to me. And it's also one reason why I love every neighbor. In Matthew 22, a religious teacher asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus says to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. There's no greater commandments than these. I believe it's mentioned 8 times, love your neighbor. So yes, everyone belongs, everyone's welcome, everyone is treated with empathy and respect. It doesn't say love every neighbor except. There are so many reasons I stand strong in love. I stand with everyone. That's who I am. And the love back and the God bless if you disagree is genuine.
This is why I say it's so important to check yourself and to examine yourself. Going back to that verse in Micah, that we are making sure that we are doing justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly before our God. When you do walk humbly before our God, that entails living in the fear of the Lord. And when you live in the fear of the Lord, you're not going to stand for everything. You're not going to stand for the ways of the world, but you're going to talk against it and you're going to speak against it. You can do that in a loving and a kind way. The Bible says we are to speak the truth in love. It's not like you're going to say, oh, this guy Dylan Mulvaney, he's the worst. No, you don't have to say that, but you don't even really, she didn't even have to say anything or bring this guy onto her channel, but bringing this guy onto her channel for a bunch of little kids and their parents to watch is saying that you are saying that the homosexual lifestyle is okay and that we should be telling our children about this, when children don't need to know about adults' sexual preferences. That is not for children to know at all. We are to love people, of course, but in loving people, you are telling them the way to get to Christ and the way to get to heaven, which is by following after Christ and following his ways, following his words. Yes, we are to love people, but we shouldn't stand with this sexual sin. Paul implores the Christians in 1 Corinthians 6:18, where he says, flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. So if you are being told to flee these sins, why would you represent it as being okay as a Christian on your channel, let alone to children? And when you find yourself in a position of success, examine yourself. Examine if you are walking humbly with your God by following his ways, representing him to the world. When you do find success and the world looks at you as this figure of prominence and success, you're going to find it in yourself to be like, oh, like this success, it comes from me, it comes from this and that. It's natural, it's human nature to want to elevate ourselves and to want to be looked upon as this great thing or this great person. But we have to, as Christians, we have this responsibility to keep our flesh in check and to not walk in the sin of pride, because when you start walking in pride, destruction and your downfall will quickly follow. Psalm 75 verse 6-7 says, for exaltation comes neither from the east nor the west nor the south, but God is the judge. He puts down one and exalts another. You have to remember that when you choose to humble yourself, then you are exalted by God. But when you get to that place of exaltation, you have to remember to stay humble. because it's God who places us in positions, and it's God who has the power to take us down a notch when we need to be. Is able to bring up kingdoms to fulfill his purposes, and he is able to bring down entire kingdoms. So will he not do that to one of his own people who have become enraptured in pride? Yes, he will. He is no respecter of persons at all. So we have to remember that it's so important that we as Christians, we remain humble before our God, because pride comes before destruction. Well, that's all I have for you all today. I am so grateful for everyone who listens and watches my YouTube channels. I pray for you guys, and I just pray that this channel is a blessing to everyone who listens, and it just pushes each and every one of us to draw closer to God. And Lord willing, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.